Alrighty, so I'm going to do a demonstration on how to trace your self-portrait. And since I am not doing a live demonstration with the actual materials, I'm going to do it digitally and create layers that take the place of the materials that you're going to be using. So, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to take a headshot of yourself, a portrait of yourself, rather, right? And this is your portrait, right? So you have a portrait, you split your portrait, and I'm going to minimize this for a second and I'll set it over here. And you split your portrait into four parts. Here's the first part. Here's the second part. Here's the third part. And whoops, when you printed this on your copy paper, it had a white trim and you trim that off. The easiest way that I recommend trimming is simply by taking your ruler, laying it on the edge of your paper so only the white trim, the white margin that runs around the edge of your printed paper is exposed. And you take your exacto knife and you just evenly, with an even pressure, run that exacto knife down the edge of your ruler and you cut the paper, right? And it'll give you a nice straight edge. You don't want to use your scissors, just make a nice straight edge. Once you're done doing that, when these look a little, oh, they're the same size, good. Once you do that, you will then uh, take this, I say flip it over on so it's face side down, just make sure the orientation is correct. And you're going to tape them together, right? You're going to take a piece of tape and you'll go all the way down the center on the backside and all the way across, sealing those seams, right? Putting them back together because you've resized your image so it's now larger, right? So now you have your portrait that's been enlarged, it's been split, and the splitting is so you can print it out, right? Because we don't have large pieces of paper to print on. So you've taken a photo of yourself, you've cropped it, you've split it, you've printed it, excuse me, you've trimmed the white edges, you've taped it back together, and now you're going to trace it. So you have your portrait and you're going to get your tracing paper. So let me get some tracing paper. This is my tracing paper. And my tracing paper is white. And I'm going to make tracing paper. Look at that. Okay. So this is my tracing paper. And I put my tracing paper on top of my portrait. And I might even make it a tiny, there you are. I put it on top of my portrait. My tracing paper is going to be larger. So what I recommend is, since your tracing paper is going to be a bit larger, I'll give it a border right now just so you can really see it, right? This is your tracing paper. It's going to be larger than your put together portrait. Just fold over like an inch or an inch and a half over your portrait and then tape it to the back. That way, when you lift it up, it doesn't slide, right? Don't tape all four edges, just tape the top. Slide your portrait down so it's about an inch or inch and a half lower than the edge of your tracing paper, and then fold your tracing paper over the portrait. You can crease that edge and then put a piece of tape along the back, entirely across the back edge, just so you can secure it, right? And that way, when you lift it up, it stays in place. You don't want to tape all four edges because you're going to need to lift up your paper from the bottom time to time to just find your place and to confirm certain things. So let's resize this tracing paper because I've folded the top edge, and I'll get rid of that border since we don't need that. There we are. So you're going to find when you're at home, if you don't have a light table, that tracing your face might be difficult because the tracing paper is probably actually going to look more like this, right? So it's going to be a little difficult. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to do this in the daytime, and you're going to want to go to a window, find a window in your home. I have a nice large windows in my living room, and or go to your bedroom window, and you're going to take your portrait with your tracing paper that has already been folded and taped onto it, and you're going to tape it to the window during daylight, because that way the light will shine through your portrait and the tracing paper, and you will be able to see it better, and you'll have a better uh, view, something like this, right? So tape it to the window to help you trace. Okay, so once you've done that, you have your portrait, you have your tracing paper taped to it, and your portrait with tracing paper is taped to your window. You're now going to start looking at your values. One thing that I recommend is pulling up your 5 value scale. You pull your 5 value grayscale out of your notebook archive, and you have it next to you. And that way you'll start to, where's my pulling up here? You can start to look and say, okay, so here are some of the values that I'm seeing, right? So here's my 5 value scale. So I have it next to me. I can even tape it to the wall if I want, but I have my 5 value scale that I painted, and I can now start looking at these um, values on the face to give me an idea of what my values are, right? Um, this image is warmer than my colors. Um, this 5 value scale was actually made with, I believe this one was with acrylic. And so the black that I used was a cooler black. So, but I still have an idea of what my 25% is, my 50%, and my 75%. Okay. So theoretically, I have this on the side. Okay. So I'm going to get my pencil, and I'll do it in a bright color so you can see. I'm going to take my pencil, and now I'm going to start looking at shapes. Okay, and when I start looking at shapes, I'll start to relate them to either value 1, which is white, excuse me, value 2, which is 25% gray, value 3, which is 50% middle gray, value 4, which is my 75% gray, and value 5, which is my 100% black. So I see a shape here. Pencil. And this looks like it might be my 2. So I'm going to just put a 2 here. So as you're drawing your shapes, you're going to number them on your tracing paper. I have a value that's lighter here. And it actually looks like it goes around. And this is my 1. This looks like a 2. And then here, this is my 1. I have, maybe this is my 3. This is my 4. This looks like my 3. Actually, this looks like my 2 here. And this is my 3. I have a highlight here, so I'll make this my 1. I have another highlight here. So you see, I'm not just drawing the shape of his head. I'm looking at the shapes that are on his face, right? This is going to be a 1 for sure. And this is a 4, right? So I'm finding these values, right? I'm finding these values that are shapes. And I'm shaping that, and I'm identifying them by color, right? Now I might decide, I find students do this twice, right? Like I might do this and say, okay, maybe there are just too many that I'm finding here, and as I mentioned before, and I'll see if I can find one that there was a student that just had so many shapes. I might be able to make some of these larger and that it still works, right? So this could definitely be my 2, right? Let me erase that because I went a little bit over another shape. Oops. So there's a nice little shape right here that I want to get. That's definitely a shadow that's important. So I think this will be my 4. Right here is this great little color, which is going to be a 4. It's too small for me to put that in. This shape is a 2 for sure. And then I have some darker values here that I can identify. I think this is, I don't know, maybe for dramatic effect, this might be my 5, right? So you see what I'm doing here? His ear. I think this will be a 2, right? So I'm drawing the shapes that end up making up his face, even with his eyes, right? So I have white here. Definitely, if I'm going to go this far, right, this highlights will be 1, right? I have to identify what these values are, but look at the white of his eyes, right? I'm not drawing the shape of his eye, but I'm drawing the shape of this white here, right? I don't know. I have to determine if this highlight is white, is this going to be white or is this a 2? I'm not sure yet. I have to figure that out. And what I can do is I'd lift up my tracing paper, right? I'm pretending like I'm lifting up my tracing paper, right? And I can look and see if I need clarity on what these values are, right? So I'll do that for the face. Now the hair is an interesting situation, right? I have students who identify and choose blocks of color in the hair, right? It's a lot of work, and not that I want you to avoid a lot of work, but you have to determine what's visually interesting, right? Do I create a section of hair like this that becomes a highlight, right? And let's just say this is a 2, and then this part of the hair, right? Let's just say becomes maybe and it depends on what's here, right? Maybe this is really a 4, right? And so that contrast makes it interesting, right? I can take smaller amounts of hair here, right? And maybe this is a 4, but then these highlights, right? Because there's less light than on this side is the 3, right? So that might be really interesting because we have this 1 and 2 and 3 here, even though there's a 4 here. So the contrast of that 4 becomes this part of the hair, and then 2 and 3, right? So I do this all for the face. I do it for the neck as well. I do have highlight here. So this might be my 1, right? Even this might be my 1 or 2, depending on how I visually see this underneath. Clearly, this is my 3. Well, no, that's going to be 2. Looks like that's 2. Because I have this nice thing here, which is 3. And if I'm looking at my 4s, this looks like this I'm going quickly here and I'm using a digital tool, but if I was using a pencil, it would be a little different, right? This is my 4. This might be my 3 here. And then this, even though we see this, right? The tendency might be, oh, this is just 5. But if we lift this up, do we see any values here? We have to determine that, right? This could potentially all be 5, right? Or I can even see through here, right? There are some values, right, that I might identify as little wrinkles and highlights that exist, right? And maybe these are 4s, and then the rest of this is 5, right? Mhm. Okay, right? So this is how you trace. So once you do this and you've completed your tracing, you then remove the tracing from the photograph. So we'll take the photograph away. We don't need that anymore. And you have your tracing here, right? Then you get your mixed media paper, which is this white space we see here, right? This background is the mixed media paper. You take your Saral paper. I can't move this right now. Let me try. If I group all this together, can I group all this together? Let's see. Can I group all this? We'll see if it lets me. Arrange. Yeah, I can't because it's actually, I drew it with Zoom, so I can't. So let's just pretend this is on our tracing paper still, right? So this white background is our mixed media paper, right? We know that our, excuse me, we know that our mixed media paper is 18 inches, right? And that's right here, by 24 inches, which is on this side, right? So this is our mixed media paper now. I take my, and I have to visually, I can't move this. So just, you guys are just gonna have to use your imagination for a moment. So this is my mixed media paper, this white space in the background. I then get my Saral paper, which is a graphite color. So we'll make it this color. And I cover my mixed media paper with my graphite paper. I put it on top. Where did my numbers go? Anyway, we got the idea. I don't know why it's disappearing. Okay. I take my Saral paper and I put it graphite side down. When you touch your Saral paper, you'll understand which side is the graphite side. All you have to do is put your thumb on one side and your index finger on the other, and gently slide it. And the side that has the graphite on your finger, that's the graphite side, and it's usually the silkier, the smoother, shinier side. The side that doesn't have the graphite kind of is a muted side. So you're going to put the graphite side down. Imagine it's basically paper pencil. So you want the paper pencil graphite side facing your mixed media paper. This too will be slightly larger than your mixed media paper, so you'll just tape over the edge. If for some reason it isn't, just tape the edges to the mixed media paper. You'll then take your tracing paper and put your tracing paper, tape it on top of your Saral. So you have your mixed media on the bottom, you have your Saral on top of that, and then you have your tracing paper on top of the Saral. And then you are going to go back and you are going to retrace your tracing. Now, why am I retracing my tracing? I am retracing my tracing because the pressure I am applying on the retracing is now going to transfer my drawing onto the mixed media paper, because it's like using a pencil, right? That Saral paper has graphite, and when I am retracing my tracing, I am applying pressure, and everywhere I apply a pressure retraces, applies pressure on the Saral paper, which then draws it on the mixed media paper, right? So I retrace my drawing. I also do my numbers. Now, I will tell you, your ones, you should do it very lightly because some people find it difficult for the white paint to cover the graphite. So some people don't write their ones in, but you definitely can, right? So you're going to retrace and number so you know, right? You're going to do the whole thing. Then you remove your tracing paper, you remove your graphite, and then you have your mixed media paper with your new drawing on it. And then from there, you start painting your grayscale according to the numbers you've identified. And you already have your 5-value grayscale, so you know what your grayscale color should look like. My recommendation when you start painting your grayscale is that you mix enough of whatever value you're going to do and you paint all of those first. So if you're going to paint all of your fives first, you paint all your blacks first, right? If you're going to paint then your 75%, you mix enough paint so you have your 75% and you get all of your number fours done. You do the same for all of the grays that you have to mix. Because if you only do a small amount and you run out, you are never going to be able to make that same gray again. I guarantee you, and you're going to end up making a new batch and repainting over all of that particular value. So if you're going to do your middle value, which is 3, you need to paint enough, I'd say more than enough to make sure you have it, of your middle value so you can get all of your 3s done. When it's time for you to do your number 2 value, which is 25%, you paint either enough or slightly more than enough to get all of your 2s done. Your white and your black are easy because you just pour that out of the bottle or the tube, right? So make sure you paint enough and do all of your one value at a time so you have enough. You're going to do the exact same thing for your monochromatic. Everything is the same, and then you have to identify your monochromatic values. So what I recommend, and I'll write the depending on when you're seeing this video, if it's not up already, um, you will have your hue, which is your going to be your 3%, and you'll have 2 shades and 2 tints, right? You will not have a pure black in your monochromatic, and you will not have a pure white in your monochromatic. You're going to get the lightest, palest tint you can create for your highlights, and then the darkest shade that makes sense for you for your shadow. Okay. And you might even want to make your value scale first, but you already have your 11 value scale, so you know you can pull from those, right? But I definitely recommend you again, even with your monochromatic, mixing your particular shade first for 4 and 5, and then your particular tints for 1 and 2 in their entirety, so you can paint all of that particular value. Okay. Alrighty, and that is how you trace and transfer and paint your self portrait.